What's happening, everybody? How's it going? Welcome back, and thank you again for joining me for another BG-Cast Wednesday live podcast. Well, guys, it was not supposed to be a solo show tonight. It was supposed to be common ground, but nonetheless, my show will always go on no matter what. Not gonna lie, though, I'm a little bummed out it did not happen. I really felt that it was going to be something big, even though it did not seem that way. But nonetheless, I'm not giving up. I'm not a quitter. I never have been in my life. So I will continue to pursue this. It's very interesting, man, right now. Just a lot of the stuff that I'm personally going through. I'm not going to get into it too much. I definitely feel in some ways I am under attack and I am being silenced. All of you who have been following me for a long time, and even some of the recent people, you see the stuff I post. It's very empowering. It talks about igniting the divine spark within us and realizing that divine spark within us, healing our traumas, healing this collective, trying to cultivate a sense of peace and unity in this collective. What else? Tips to self mastery. What else? Yes, I occasionally post my political opinion. I occasionally give my 2 cents on some things that are going on. But all in all, guys, I'm being shadow banned across every single platform at this point in time. Even Rumble, even YouTube, even X. X is supposed to be about free speech, but it's only about free speech if you're catering to the narrative. So the biggest thing I can ask of all of you tonight, who are watching, who are listening, or anybody who's listening in the future, just share me. Tell people about me, okay? Inform them about me, share my stuff, okay? Because in a lot of ways at this point in time, I feel like I'm one of the only people here doing real work. And Spinja and Don, thanks for being here, you two. I appreciate it, you guys. Much love. I'm always happy to see you guys. But in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm one of the only ones doing real work here. You look at all of these other spiritual content creators, all of these other spiritual podcasters, all of these other conspiracy and truther podcasters. What are they doing? They're dividing you further. They're adding to the dysfunction in our collective. I just, common sense applies. You'd think you would listen to the people who are being silenced. I mean, what does everybody in the truther community do when we're doing our research? And in the spiritual community, when we're doing our research, we look at all of the people who have been silenced. A good example of this is the Bishop and the Pastor incident. For those of you who don't know who Bishop is, he was against Louis Pasteur. All right. You know who Pasteur is. Pasteurization. He's the reason we have germ theory. But Bishop had a different theory. He had terrain theory, which actually makes a lot more sense than germ theory. But because Bishop did not have the elite connections, the socialite connections, all of that stuff, he was silenced. But here's the thing. This is what I've noticed about the spiritual and the truther communities at this point in time. You research and you look through all of the information that's been silenced throughout the years. But then now you turn your heads to the mainstream sources who are talking. I'm not going to go off on this tangent for the whole episode, but goddamn, guys, like today is another day. I looked at the black pill. I will never take it. Don't get me wrong, but today is a day I did. But nonetheless, one thing I want to touch on real quick before we start this episode is the drones over New Jersey. I'm going to say a little thing about them. Guys, you probably already know what I think about these drones over New Jersey at this point in time. Use your discernment. That's the best thing I'm going to say. I do not know if they are real or fake. I cannot give you the definite evidence. on if they are real or fake, but use your discernment, stay sovereign, and don't become attached to anything. This is the game that we're playing right now. But nonetheless, guys, let's hop into the episode. I threw this together in an hour and a half, and it actually came out quite good, despite the fact the original show was canceled. But nonetheless, let's get to it. This is my official ending episode to the pre-Nicene Rabbit Hole series. I figured this would be a good place to cap this topic off, at least for the time being. Although I am definitely open to touching on this subject in the future with new discoveries, anything else that comes up. But nonetheless, you guys already know how I feel about modern Christianity. I feel it is a far cry from what it once was. It has lost its connections to the spiritual nature. It was turned into a control structure by the two councils of Nicaea. There was two. And then we have the 5 Catholic councils, the 3 English councils, and the unknown number of Jewish councils that occurred when it came to the biblical canon. And these councils were all governments dictating what the people should be able to read. Basically, in a nutshell, modern Christianity is a creation of government, not Jesus Christ himself, at least in my opinion. So what we're going to kind of get into on this episode is we're going to talk about the free will principle. We're going to talk about the aspects of the free will principle and how it applies to the alterations of the Bible. This is I guess you could say a rebuttal or a conversation I have with a lot of modern Christians at this point in time. But these are my 2 biggest rebuttals that I get from modern Christians when I bring this topic up. This one right here, God wouldn't allow his word to be tampered with. Or this one right here, God preserved his word the way he sees fit. And normally when I hear this from, this rebuttal from a lot of modern Christians, I think to myself, you don't understand the free will principle. So let's kind of dig into the free will principle a little bit. We're going to go with the bare basic definition, and then we're going to kind of dive into the spiritual definitions. And we're going to also talk about how free will could potentially be an aspect of the ego. And we're going to dive into a little bit of Carl Jung tonight when we're talking about that. And then we're going to kind of sum it all up together with the alterations that have occurred to the Bible and what I think actual true Christianity is. So nonetheless, guys, let's hop to it. I got Andrew saying not everything is a psyop, but most things are. I agree with that. But nonetheless, let's hop to it, guys. So let's look at the bare basic definition of free will and what it means, because I know a lot of people in the spiritual community think we don't necessarily have free will. And I'm going to tell you this, it's not as black and white of a conversation as that. That's the thing with a lot of, I got Benjamin Doverson saying, yay, Young. Hell yeah, man. Thank you for being here, Benjamin Doverson. I have to tell you, dude, I love your handle. I always have. I never had the chance to say that to you, but man, I do. I think it is quite clever and quite funny. But, nonetheless, this is the bare basic definition of free will. We're going to kind of go over this real quick. So we have free will in philosophy and science, the supposed power or capacity of humans to make decisions or perform actions independently of any prior event or state of the universe. Arguments for free will have been based on the subjective experience of freedom, on sentiments of guilt, on revealed religion, and on the common assumption of individual moral responsibility that underlies the concepts of law, reward, punishment, and incentive. In theology, the existence of free will must be reconciled with God's omniscience and benevolence and with divine grace, which allegedly is necessary for any meritorious act. A prominent feature of existentialism, which I'm starting to dislike, is the concept of a radical, perpetual, and frequently agonizing freedom of choice. Jean-Paul Sartre, for example, spoke of the individual condemned to be free. So what we have here is a bare basic definition for free will. Okay, and we're going to get into a little bit more of the spiritual definition. We kind of touched on that a little bit with that previous one, but it goes a little bit deeper. And I have something I will really want to show you guys. So let's pull this article up right here. Let's go down here. So we have understanding free will, exploring choice, destiny, and control. So one theory I want to talk about real quick is I'm actually gonna give a shout out to Sarah the Alchemist, and she says that you can gain access to more free will through your spiritual evolution. And the one thing I'm going to say about that is she's absolutely right, because one thing I'm really big on that I've talked about on this show for a very long time is we need to ditch the term awakening. I still use it for the sake of being ergonomic so people understand what I'm saying. But in all reality, I feel like this term is doing us a disservice. And the reason why is you're not awakening to anything, you're remembering. Okay. And that's why I call it the great remembering and I call it the great forgetting. All right. We're leaving the great forgetting as we're talking right now, and we're entering this great remembering, because all of this, how many times have I said, guys, we're subjective focal points of the divine consciousness. Okay, we are everything that was, is, or ever will be. Okay. And with that being said, we have to understand that all of this information we have in our blood, in our physical being, the genetic information from the humans of antiquity. Okay, we have that information within us. It's in our genetic code. Okay, so that's why I think we need to drop this term awakening and we need to stick with remembering. And that's getting into what I'm saying, because as you remember more, as you continuously remember more of your divine nature, as you continuously remember more of the divine conscious nature of this existence, you are going to access more free will through that evolution. And what I mean by that is you start to cultivate this inner standing, right? And I was talking with someone earlier about this. Like, yes, like, I would never claim to have total inner standing, but at this point, I feel like I'm hanging on to this little tiny hair, this little tiny hair of understanding. And that's better than no understanding or understanding at all. So, as we continue to remember more and we go on our evolution, we're going to understand that we do have access to more free will. But nonetheless, let's kind of get into this. So, embracing the power of free will, a spiritual exploration and guide. Introduction. Welcome to this exploration of an empowering spiritual concept, free will. Stemming from varied religious and philosophical roots, free will is a guiding force in many traditions. Yet its depth can often seem elusive or overwhelming. By understanding and embodying the principles of free will, you can enhance your life's quality in astounding ways. And that I don't disagree with, because you can. When you gain access to that remembrance, you guys remember how I've always said that you'll get to a point in your evolution, and I said this on the Hacking the Simulation episode last week, that you'll get to a point where a lot of the rules of societal Maya, or a lot of the laws and rules of societal Maya, or the matrix system, as a lot of people like to call it, will no longer apply to you. That doesn't mean you can go out and start killing people, raping people, stealing from people, and all of that. No, obviously that is regression. And if you go down that road, you're going to be susceptible to the laws and the rules of this physical realm again. But if you continue on your evolution and you continue cultivating this remembering within you, you're going to see that a lot of things no longer apply to you. And that's kind of a subjective term. And what I mean by that, I guess a great example is this. I no longer am worried about the petty issues and first world problems that a lot of this collective has. That's a great example there. I know that I'm in control of my own destiny. I am the hero of my own story. And I know that I should have no fear in moving forward, because anything that is going to happen is going to teach me. This is kind of what I mean, guys. You're no longer stuck in the third density consciousness once you start taking this route. So let's continue. In-depth explanation. What does free will really mean? In essence, it's the belief that we have the power to shape our destiny, that our actions are not predetermined, but rather influenced by individual choice. Picture yourself at a crossroads. Down one path lies an easy yet unsatisfying route. Down another lies a journey filled with growth, but also challenges. Free will, then, is taking charge of such choices consciously instead of being led blindly by fate. The idea varies across different beliefs. Some traditions argue we possess absolute free will, a total control over our lives, while others propose it exists within divine boundaries. Nevertheless, all views agree on a significant role in shaping our experiences. So the one thing I want to say about that real quick that I think could really apply to the topic at hand. So I'm going to touch on this a little later in the show too. But the one thing I'm going to say right now is that yes, we are subjective focal points of the divine. We are consciousness. We are that current in that sea of consciousness. Okay. So, in essence, the divine boundaries are boundaries we set for ourselves. and, and really, this is where it kind of starts getting into finding a hard time to find the words for what I'm trying to describe. It's more of an experience. Words do fall short when I talk about this topic, but as you remember and you realize more, you'll understand what I'm saying. And that's the best thing I can leave you with as of now. Sometimes these esoteric concepts and these understandings, they're above verbal language. It's more of a feeling and an experience than something you can really put into words. But nonetheless, let's get to the practical application, and then we're diving into Carl Jung. So, practical application. Free will's application to daily life is profound and transformative. It is a compass guiding decision making at every level. Perhaps you're dealing with tense relationships. A choice to react angrily perpetuates tension, while choosing understanding fosters harmony. What do you guys think I try to do all the time? I'm trying to foster harmony here. Beyond conflict resolution, embracing free will promotes personal growth. It inspires responsibility for actions and their consequences, leading to higher compassion levels for oneself and others, as mistakes aren't viewed as predestined blunders, but learning opportunities. So this is kind of the picture I'm going to paint before we go a little bit further. So one of the things I'm going to say is when we fell from the Garden of Eden, and if you look at a lot of the different Gnostic scriptures and a lot of the other scriptures, this fall wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Now, before everybody gets their panties in a bunch for what I just said, if you're looking at the Gnostic version of events, like when we were in the Garden of Eden, we were in a false unity consciousness. We were in this unity consciousness by the demiurge, Yaldabaoth, who actually was in the intro filler video. I decided to give him space because he's coming up in conversation tonight. But when we, what did you say here, Kyle? To be east of her. All right, Kyle, we will touch on that at the end of the show. I'll give you my explanation for that, but thank you for being here, man. But we fell from this false unity consciousness and we gained an ego. Okay, so let's talk about how free will could potentially be a byproduct of the ego. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, because yes, ultimately, while we still are divine focal points, when we are in this physical existence, we have the ego in pilot mode. And the ego is mostly taking care and control of this experience. Now, there are ways to work around that. Both you and I know this. And there are ways to bypass the ego or soften the ego, whether it be through different types of internal alchemy, meditation, or entheogenic plants. There are ways to soften the ego and dampen the ego and bypass it in your conscious everyday waking life. So this is not something we're tied to, But nonetheless, let's get into Carl Jung, who I'm glad people are excited for this one tonight. So let's go here. So we got Carl Jung on the ego and free will. And this is from Carl Jung, Depth Psychology. So this is what we're going to do here. Patience to build a strong ego, but the stronger the ego is and the more flexible it is, the more it can allow to come through from the unconscious mind. And that's where the real wisdom is. So this is exactly what you heard me saying here. There are ways to bypass the ego, or to soften it and allow our inner wisdom, the unconscious, or what I believe to be the divine consciousness that exists within us all, to shine through. So let's kind of dive into this for a little bit here. So we have Carl Jung on the ego and free will. I have suggested calling the total personality, which through present cannot be fully known to the self. The ego is by definition subordinate to the self and is related to it like a part of the whole. Inside the field of consciousness it has, we say, free will. By this, I do not mean anything philosophical. Only the well-known psychological fact of free choice, or rather the subjective feeling of freedom. But just as our free will clashes with necessity in the outside world, so also it finds its limits outside the field of consciousness in the subjective inner world. You remember how we talked about that last episode, where it comes into conflict with the facts of the self. And just as circumstances or outside events happen to us and limit our freedom, so the self acts upon the ego like an objective occurrence, which free will can do very little to alter. It is indeed well known that the ego not only can do nothing against the self, but it is sometimes actually assimilated by unconscious components of the personality that are in the process of development and is greatly altered by them. So that's just something I want to bring up real quick before we kind of dive into this a little bit further. So the one thing I'm going to add, all right, let's take the equation. We fell from the Garden of Eden. We gained free will, and free will potentially along with an ego or a sense of separation. Okay. And with that sense of separation, in a sense, the divine or God or whoever you choose, to believe that could be, no longer has a direct hand in human affairs. So this is the free will principle. So if the divine no longer has a direct hand in human affairs, but even that's a gray area because we're all the divine incarnate walking around and we are in these human affairs. But like I said, this isn't black and white, but nonetheless, okay, let's use the consensual narrative to describe what I'm talking about at this point. God took a step back and allowed humans to do their thing. So when I see things like these rebuttals and this rebuttal, it shows me that that individual doesn't understand the free will principle, because when we fell from the Garden of Eden, we gained free will in the self, and that means in the ego, and that means that ultimately we can do whatever we choose to do. We have that freedom of choice. Now, I've talked about this many times on this channel on how when people are in positions of power, we have something called psychological gravitations. Okay. All governments and establishments start off through altruistic means. Don't 100% believe that, but I'm just throwing that out there for the consensual narrative. But over time, we always see this gravitation towards egotism and power. So this is what I'm going to discuss now when we're talking about the alterations of the Bible. So one of the biggest things I want to bring up, at least at this point in time, I talked about the councils that dictated the control structure that Christianity is today. And the other extra 8+ councils that occurred. Now, these councils were all governments. So you guys heard me talk about free will, how we fell from the Garden of Eden, we gained free will, And I believe free will is a byproduct of that ego, potentially. And now we have these humans on Earth running amok, falling prey to their nature, their psychology, okay, and their psychological issues that we've had ever since we've been in existence. So let's take a look at these councils here. So we have the Catholic Church, the canon of the Catholic Church was affirmed by the Council of Rome, the Synod of Hippo, the two councils of Carthage, the Council of Florence, and the Council of Trent. But then we have 3 extra English councils that dictated biblical canon as well. Now, mind you guys, all of these councils were government. And they came from government. So that's one of the biggest things when we're discussing the King James Bible. And, we're discussing the New Universal Text. These are government-sanctioned Bibles. Okay, they're government-sanctioned Bibles. I'm a huge believer that government should have nothing to do with our spirituality. Government cannot dictate to me at all what is necessary for my salvation. And that's the one thing I feel a lot of modern Christians at this point in time are being duped by. They're clutching their King James Bible. They are clutching their New Universal Text. And they are saying that this is the real world of God, real word of God. And they're giving me these rebuttals. Okay, but this is where we need to have common sense come into play. So I have a really awesome article here by this site was actually really cool. I'm going to bring this up real quick right now. I'm not going to lie, guys. I'm not 100% myself tonight, but we are going to make it. We are going to do this. So one of the biggest things we have here is we have Stand to Reason from Clear Thinking Christianity. The Bible has been translated many times over. How can it be reliable? Well, this is another thing I'm willing to accept when it comes to the credibility of the Bible too, is it wasn't, I guess you could say, directly altered, but we have a game of the game of telephone. We have all of these translations from different languages into different languages. I can't negate the fact that it's possible that there were some things lost in translation. However, when we see how the 2 councils of Nicaea approached Christianity and turned it into what it is today, I do think that we could be dealing with a half and half. Remember how I said the infiltration of our community, this conscious collective, can be half organic synthesis and it can be half infiltration. And that's one thing I've said a lot of times on this show when we're looking to the answers to these questions. They always line up somewhere in the middle. They're never on the extreme end of the polarity. But nonetheless, let's get into this. The Bible can now be read in nearly 700 different languages. For the New Testament, the number jumps over to 1,500 languages. It's not surprising then that the Bible is the most translated book in history. Christians see the number of translations as a good thing. More people are able to read God's word in their own language. Others, however, seem to think the number of translations is a bad thing. I'm one of those people. In fact, they cite the number of translations in order to call into question the Bible's reliability. In a Newsweek cover story titled "The Bible So Misunderstood It's a Sin," journalist and author Kurt Eichenwald asserts no television preacher has ever read the Bible. Neither has any evangelical politician. Neither has the Pope. Neither have I, and neither have you. But I have. At best, we've all read a bad translation. A translation of translations of translations of hand-copied copies of copies of copies of copies, and so on, hundreds of times. But the one big thing I'm going to say here is this, and this is the biggest thing that's going to hit the point home, is this. The church is not an authority. Only the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are your authority. So with that being said, we can see out of this statement on how no television preacher has ever read the Bible, no evangelical politician, neither has the Pope, any of that. Are we really looking at a real credible document for not only the word of God, but the life, the story, and the word of Jesus Christ at this point? And that's something I think that every modern Christian should be asking themselves. Are we really doing this? So, nonetheless, all right, this is a really good article. Again, I'm not going to bore you guys with the entire thing, but I have left all the links at the bottom of the description for the YouTube and the Rumble videos. So you guys can look at this yourself. So now let's take a look at 18 ways the Bible has been altered. And there's a huge, huge one that I want to bring up, especially when it comes to the book of Revelation. So let's have a talk about this real quick. So let's see here. So we have 18 alterations to the Bible and its consequences. So there's a lot of people who think the Bible has not been altered at all. They, again, shoot these rebuttals at me. And with that shooting these rebuttals at me, okay, here's some pretty hardcore evidence that the Bible has been altered, and a huge alteration that is very telling. So let's take a look at this right here. So we have Acts 8:337 from the King James Version of the Bible confuses readers on requirements for baptism. That's kind of a small one when we're kind of looking at it in retrospect. But the one I really want to show you guys that's very telling is this one. Bible word counts differ substantially, yet Revelations threatens God's consequences if the text is altered. So this is one very important alteration I'm going to talk with you guys about, especially a lot of you big modern Christian buffs out there. Word count is a very important thing. So let's get into this. The word counts of the complete Bible text differ, obviously between the different translations and sometimes within editions of the same translation. For example, one source reports the New International Version, it's the New International Version, not New Universal, I correct myself there, as containing 727 words, 969 words. Another claims the NIV's word count is 726,109. The King James Version is 783,137. The New King James Version is reported by the same word count sources containing 770 and 430 words. Obviously, many words have been removed from different editions or versions of the Bible, which renders them works of the editors and scholars which prepared them. And we know who a lot of these editors and scholars were. They were government-sanctioned editors and scholars. Why is this of any significance? Revelations 22:19 KJV reads, "And if any man shall take away from the words of this book of prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life and out of the holy city, and from things which are written in this book." It can be argued that the ominous warning in the verse applies only to the book of Revelations in which it appears, but it still seems clear that modifying the book by addition or subtraction is a punishable offense. The same verse appears with different wording and phrasing in other translations. The Amplified Bible takes the modification a great deal further. Okay, so that's something that should be standing out to a lot of people at this point, is that we have these different word counts. Let's talk a little bit about King James for a second here and why the King James Version of the Bible came to be, which is a very popular version that a lot of people read today. So let's kind of dive into that just a little bit here. And this is going to definitely surprise a few of you. So let's go here. Stay with me, guys. I just got to find it. I got a lot of tabs open. Okay. All right, we're going to look it up real quick while you guys are sitting here with me because I don't think it was here. So let's take a look here real quick. Thanks for being patient tonight, guys. I am a little bummed out. I'm not going to lie. So it's just the way it is. So the biggest thing I'm going to bring up here now, I got it up here for you guys. Hold on one second. Let's talk about King James real quick. So I'm just going to bring up this excerpt from Wikipedia. We have King James the First commissioned the King James Version of the Bible in 1604, which involved revising existing translations to create a new authorized version. While he did not personally change the text, the translators aimed to produce a version that aligned with the Church of England's beliefs and corrected perceived errors in earlier translations. So let's bring this up just a little bit more. But the one thing, too, that this little thing did not show us is the original Geneva text questioned the powers of the bishops and the monarchy. Again, guys, the church is not an authority. That's the biggest thing. So, one thing I'd like to show you guys tonight real quick before we kind of all start wrapping this up is this. So what I have right here is I have a translation of the Lord's Prayer, Our Father, directly from Aramaic. This was not translated from Hebrew. This was not translated from Greek. This is directly from Aramaic. And what we kind of start to see is we see a very different Lord's Prayer. One that I've actually kind of started adopting myself and saying in my morning gratefulness rituals because it makes a lot more sense to me, and I think it will to you as well. So let's pull this up real fast. I believe this is the one. Yep. So we have, O birther, father dash mother of the cosmos. You create all that moves in light. Focus your light within us. Make it useful. As the rays of a beacon show the way. Unite our I can to yours so that we walk as kings and queens with every creature. Create in me divine cooperation for many selves, one voice, one action. Grant what we need each day in bread and insight. Forgive our hidden past, the secret shames, as we consistently forgive what others hide. Deceived neither by the outer or the inner, free us to walk your path with joy. From you is born all ruling will, the power and life to do. The song that beautifies all from age to age, it renews. Amen. So this is very different, guys. Very, very different. Compared to Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. But lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. It's a very different translation. And as you can see, they have the original translation on the top here. So this is just another example of how we need to be looking deeper into what real Christianity is. So real quick, I'm going to kind of give my breakdown on what I feel real Christianity is. I have a little bit of a banner show I'm going to bring up. And this is truly what I think we need to be focusing on when it comes to this. We should not be focusing on the church. We should not be focusing on the Pope. We should not be focusing on any of these people who claim that they need to be a medium between you and the divine, because you have that direct connection. That is what I believe Jesus was telling everybody. You have that direct connection with the divine. You don't even need to use him. You have that connection. I got some comments. I got Don Rogers is literally called the King James Version. It was rewritten to please the king when it was read to him. Absolutely. Of course, it's altered. Thanks, Don. And then Andrew, thanks, bro. Yeah, no, I'm not exactly myself tonight. I'm a little bummed, but we're doing this, man. But I'll get over it. I'm not going to die. So, nonetheless, man, here's what I think is. So, what is true Christianity? Let's have a discussion about that real quick. First thing, understanding the kingdom of God is within you and without you. Jesus said this many a times, okay? Not only in the Gospel of Thomas, but in other Gospels throughout the Bible. What does this mean to me? Well, do you remember on my last episode when we were talking about hacking the simulation, how our internal existence is very important and how this organic or potential organic simulation could be an outward projection of the internal experience? We are also subjective focal points of the divine, of God. Okay. So, this is what I think this means. We have to understand that we are the kingdom of heaven. We are a direct subjective focal point of God. And with that, our outward perceived existence is also of the divine as well. This is why I can't 100% buy into the Gnostic concept that the material world is evil. I think the material world is here to teach us lessons. It's here to teach us. Okay. And, I've talked about the Maya of nature on this channel many a times. The Maya of nature is immensely spiritual. It's immensely beneficial to us. Okay. So this is the thing. Stop looking without of yourself for God and understand that God is both within you and without of you. I think that's the first thing a lot of people are missing. The second thing a lot of modern Christians are missing, at least in my opinion, treating others the way you wish to be treated. Yes, the golden rule, the almighty golden rule. Well, this is something I see. I actually have a little story I'm going to entertain you guys with. So I used to work with a guy. He used to go to a certain Christian church. He was an electrician too, just like me. And one day he really wanted to get to mass. He had to work a little bit late. And he ended up going to mass in his work clothes. Now, mind you, us electricians get very dirty at work sometimes. It's just part of the job. Another day at the office. But so he showed up to mass in his work clothes, and everybody was staring at him and giving him dirty looks. And he couldn't understand what he did wrong or what was going up. So after mass, he went up to the pastor and he went, "Pastor, why is everybody looking at me so strangely? Like, what's wrong? Did I do something?" And the pastor went up to him and said, "Don't you think you should have worn something nicer to church?" He immediately stopped going to that church. And I commend him for that, because this is not treating others the way you wish to be treated. So that would be something I think that would be an embodiment of what true Christ or what true Christianity would be. The other one, loving thy neighbor. Yes, I know. Jesus sounds like a hippie, doesn't he? He sounds like a based hippie at that. But, at the same time, okay, this is something I think, bringing back that sense of community within ourselves and learning that the people next door to you put their pants on the same way every morning. They work a job just like you do. They have families they take care of just like you do, and they deserve the same love and respect that you do. So this is something I think would be what I think is true Christianity, would be these principles. And one thing I'm starting to see a pattern in, true Christianity is way less about the Bible and more about a way of life. It's more about being like Christ. So that's something I think, we need to start implementing. I think that's a great idea. The next one, having compassion and empathy for the less fortunate. We look at a lot of the conservative Christian right and how they treat the less fortunate and their opinions on the less fortunate. And I'm not going to lie either. That was a little bit of a double-edged sword for me too. The reason being is I know a lot of people, at least here in Denver, stay homeless because they want to be homeless. The amount of assistance that's offered to them here as far as housing, food drives, jobs, things like that. It's offered to them at nauseum. out here in Denver, but a lot of people choose to be homeless. But what I think we need to start doing is when we have compassion and empathy for the less fortunate, we have to try and cultivate compassion and empathy for that mentality as well. And I know that's a hard thing for a lot of people to do. It's definitely a hard thing for me to do because I could never let someone else take care of me. I could never rely on somebody else to take care of me. I mean, it's one thing when you're a child, and your parents are taking care of you and raising you, but you're an adult now. And so it's even something that I had to work through. I had to understand, like, I have to adopt some kind of compassion and empathy for this mentality. So having compassion and empathy for the less fortunate, as hard as it might be sometimes, it's something we need to cultivate. Okay. These are human beings too. And the next thing I'm going to throw out there, and I threw it out, the church is not an authority. Only the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are your authority. I can't tell you how many modern Christians that I run into that look at the church subconsciously as a form of authority, but really, that's the most anti-Christian thing you could do, in my opinion. They are not an authority on deciphering the texts. They are not an authority on what texts are important to you. They are not the authority on that. You yourself are the authority on that, and you being an aspect of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Okay? That's exactly the point I'm trying to get. I can't tell you how many people I talk to. Well, the church says it means this. You're now subconsciously looking at the church as a form of authority. That's not what you're supposed to be doing as a Christian. So, and then my last thing I'm going to kind of add in here is true Christianity is in a way mysticism. You remember, I know this is going to ruffle a lot of jammies on this one, but it is essentially mysticism, because when we look at the way of life, treating other people the way you want to be treated, the kingdom of God is within you and without you. These are all very mystic concepts. And in my eyes, based on the research that I've done, a lot of early Christianity is very mystic. It's got a mystical component to it. The next thing I'm going to say is having compassion for all living beings. This kind of ties into what I was saying, especially having compassion and empathy for the less fortunate. All right, having compassion and empathy for all living beings. Like a lot of the and here's the thing, and I'm gonna throw this out here right now. A lot of the conservative Christian right likes to trophy hunt. I am all for hunting an animal if I need to eat. That's the only reason I'm up for hunting an animal, is if I need to eat. I'm not hunting an animal to cut his fucking head off and put his rack up on my wall. Or I'm not killing an animal aimlessly because I am a more powerful person and I am at the top of the food chain. So, like, yes, I'm all for hunting if you need to feed yourself, 100%. But I am not for hunting. So, wait, we got Kyle here. He's coming in here. I feel a lot of Americans' interpretation of the Bible is resulting in cultural Christianity. I'm not going to disagree with you there, man. I think it is, but that's not what it is, and I'm sure you can see that too, based on some of the stuff we talked about tonight. That cultural Christianity is not true Christianity. I think it's a byproduct, at least in my opinion. I think it's a byproduct of what modern Christianity has become. But then nonetheless, I'll digress back to what I was saying. All right. Having compassion for all living beings, that's definitely being Christian. If you need to hunt because you need to feed yourself, or you need to take that skin and make clothes for your family, or, you need to take that brain and use it for oils on like your leathers and things like that, or for facial stuff or anything like that. Yes, totally for that. Absolutely. That's using it by necessary means. I'm not for trophy hunting, but that's what a lot of the modern Christians and the conservative Christian right like to do. So that's where I'm saying we need to have compassion for all living beings. But nonetheless, guys, I have one last article we're going to hop into. And then, Kyle, I'm going to answer your question for the end of the show, which you were talking about earlier. So let's take a look at this really quickly. So here we go. We have the Bible has been changed way more than you realize. Muslims believe the Bible has been altered to allow the consumption of alcohol. That I don't know about, but I mean, the ancient Christians loved their wine rituals and they did like to imbibe in psychedelic mushrooms. But as far as that kind of belief, I don't think so. The Bible is one of the most influential texts in human history, shaping cultures and beliefs for millennia. However, the idea of its unchanging nature is more myth than reality. From its origins and oral tradition to the written gospels, countless changes, translations, and interpretations have altered its content. This article discusses how much the Bible has evolved over time, evaluating the perception of its inerrancy and divine preservation. And they're going to make me create an account to read the whole thing. I did not know that because they let me read that earlier. But nonetheless, guys, let's sum up this show. Number one, I apologize. I'm not 100% on my game tonight. I'm definitely still kind of bummed for the sheer fact that Common Ground did not go down. But nonetheless, I'm going to keep trying that. I think, guys, what we need to do is we need to understand that the book that we're dealing with, known as the King James Bible and the New International Text, I believed it was New Universal. I swore it was. Maybe it's a different timeline. I don't know. But these books are only what I would think about 4% of their original. We've had governments dictating and churches dictating what is necessary to your salvation. And I think anybody who has been on their spiritual evolution long enough can understand that you should be the sole dictator of what works for your salvation, the sole dictator on that. We've seen how the free will principle started to apply itself to us when we fell from the Garden of Eden. After we fell from the Garden of Eden, we had free will. We developed a sense of separation from the divine. So, and we can see that prevalent in our society today. Okay, we can see that prevalent in our society today. We see this immense separation from the divine. It's the way that we act towards each other. It's the way that we treat each other. But what I'm going to say is this: if you think you're reading a whole Bible or an intact Bible, I would suggest you think again. And that is what I'm going to leave everybody here with tonight. Guys, thanks for putting up with me tonight. I don't really get bummed out like this often, man. I pride myself in being a rock for you guys, because I know right now we're going through some, as we call it, some very strange alchemical transmutation process occurring to the human collective. We're all going through this very interesting time to be alive, this interesting experience. And I'm a human too, man. Sometimes I get bummed out. But there's one thing I'm gonna say. I have been through. Thank you, Don. I appreciate it, man. And this is actually going out to who needs to hear it too. And you guys can speculate who I'm talking to when I say this. But I don't talk about my life very often on this channel. This channel is not about my life. It's about learning together. Okay. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a story today. I have had a fairly decently fucked up life. I have been through absolute hell on numerous occasions. I have been metaphysically waterboarded probably now for the past going on a decade. And what do I mean by metaphysically waterboarded? My higher self likes to drag me through flaming barbed wire fences, toss water on me, give me a hug, and say, "You ready to do it again?" That's basically what I mean by that. And I have died. I have been in jail. I have been through I have probably seen things and been through things that people in their 80s and 90s have never seen or experienced in this world. It is going to take more than silencing me. It is going to take more than shadow banning me. It is going to take more than your stupid coward efforts to shut me up. And honestly, based on what I'm seeing here, you're going to have to kill me. But we know that can't happen anymore. We're beyond that stage. So, I might be having a rough one today, but that was a message to the college. And I'm just going to leave it at that. But nonetheless, guys, I don't know what's in store for next week as of yet. But I will let you guys know on Sunday. I don't know if it's going to be another guest or a solo show at this point. I'm still talking to a couple of people. But real quick, I want to thank you, Kyle. I appreciate that, man. I really do. I want to answer your question from the beginning real quick before we sign off. Let's do that real quick. So to be esoteric is evoking the concept of transgenerational epigenetic inheritance. Okay, so this is a good question, Kyle. I like this question. This is awesome. Nice work, man. It looks like you've been paying attention here. So no, it is not to be esoteric in general, but what I mean by this is there is such thing as ancestral memory. Okay, there's actually quite a bit of evidence on this ancestral memory, and it even plays into why we get skeeved out. I don't remember the exact term for it, but it plays into why we get skeeved out when we see things that look human but don't look quite human. In fact, I don't know if I have the time necessary to look it up, but there's a term for this, and if you guys know this term, leave a comment down below. But no, it's we have this ancestral memory within us, and in this ancestral memory is this genetic information through our lineage that has been passed down from the times of humans in antiquity. And with that being is you can be esoteric without accessing this per se. However, I feel the understanding of esotericism. You guys have heard me use that word a lot on this channel. The understanding of esotericism comes from tapping into this genetic memory. Elder, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you being here. Thanks, man. I did not see you tonight. Thanks, bro. Elder, I appreciate you being here. But nonetheless, guys, I won't keep you any longer. I'll be back next Wednesday. I don't know what's going on yet, but I assure you something will be happening. I have to end this season out strong. You guys take care. Have a good night. Thanks for joining me tonight. Thanks for putting up with me not at my best and being a little bummed out, but I promise that will change next week. Take care, everybody, and have a good night.